Chapter 163 The Past. Sonny stared at Castor with a grim expression. Despite the amiable smile and reassuring voice, he knew what the handsome Legacy was doing. He grew up in the outskirts, after all. Castor had said, "I will help you." But what he actually meant was, "I will own you." Because there was no better leverage than a gruesome secret. This help of his was going to come at a price. But what choice did Sonny have, really? Unless he was ready to fight and kill Castor right there and then, thus silencing the only witness of his crime forever, he couldn't refuse. Plus, what Castor thought was going to happen and what would really happen was not as set in stone as it seemed. As long as Sonny was alive, there was hope of turning things around, somehow. He just had to get through this, one step at a time. Sonny forced out a smile. "Thank you, Castor. I won't forget it." Then, he glanced at the dead body lying at his feet and took a step back, escaping the quickly growing puddle of blood. His face remained calm, but a small, almost imperceptible shiver ran through his body. "So, what do we do now?" The proud Legacy lingered, then said in a solemn tone. "First things first, we can't let anyone see you like this. Wait here for a while. I'll bring something for you to clean yourself." Sonny sighed. He didn't really want to stay anywhere near Harper, but Castor was right. Walking around covered in blood was a bad idea. "And then what?" Castor hesitated. "Then we will need to get rid of the body. But it won't be easy to do without being noticed, if not by slum rats, then by guards. Don't worry, though. I'll think of something. Just wait for me to return." Sonny hesitated, wondering if he could trust the Legacy. What was going to stop him from returning with a crowd of people? But no. Having Sonny in his pocket would benefit Castor more than getting rid of him completely. Still, he sent the Shadow to keep an eye on things after the handsome young man went away. Left alone with the corpse, Sonny sighed and sat on the floor, resting his back against the flimsy wall of the hut. He was so tired. The night was slowly descending on the ruins, drowning everything in comforting darkness. Of course, he could still see the bloodied body lying motionless on the stones beside him. For the first time, Sonny wished that his eyes weren't able to pierce through the shadows. Harper's eyes were still open, staring at him accusingly. I am stuck with you forever, aren't I?" Without even looking into the soul sea, Sonny knew that a new shadow had joined the silent ranks of every creature he had ever killed. All he could do was wait. Time slowly crawled. It was taking Castor a long time to gather everything needed without raising any suspicion. He had to avoid prying eyes and waste a lot of time conversing with people who constantly wanted to win his attention. At some point, even Cassie talked to him. "Hey, Castor. Have you seen Sonny? Do you want to read more chapters? Come to Pandanovel." Calm away from their lodge, sitting on the floor near the corpse of a young man he had killed, Sonny smiled darkly and listened to what kind of excuse the Legacy would come up with to account for his absence. After a while, his thoughts began to wander. He listened to the sound of rain falling on the stones outside and scowled. Rain always put him in a bad mood. Because of it, Sonny was always reminded of the past. Unlike Nephi's, whose past was clouded in mystery and screamed of tragedy, he came from a simple background. His story was more mundane than tragic. A trivial story of unfortunate people living hard and bitterly in a dying world. Sonny's parents were both menial workers. They were poor, but not destitute. His dad was employed by one of the numerous maintenance crews that took care of the city's outer barriers. His mom worked in an underground factory that produced air filtration systems. Together, their income was barely enough to afford a small cell in one of the human hives in the outskirts. Several months after his sister, Rain, was born, when Sonny was around 4, his father was killed in a work accident, which was not a rare occurrence among the city maintenance workers. 3 years after that, his mother got sick and eventually passed away. Factory workers like her often got sick and died due to the harsh conditions, so it wasn't a rare outcome either. Sunny and Rain were sent to a government child care facility. His sister was young and cute, so she was eventually adopted. Sunny, however, was older and had behavioral problems, which made him pretty much completely undesirable. After enduring a few years in a series of increasingly vile foster homes, he finally managed to run away and learned how to survive on the streets of the outskirts. Out there on the streets, there were a lot of kids just like him, who had to do all sorts of distasteful things every day just to live to see another sunrise. However, even then, most of them didn't last long. It took a very special kind of creature to survive there. Sunny was one such creature. A part of this was pure luck, a part of it was that he was smart. But mostly it was because he had a goal. Sunny refused to die before finding his sister. Somehow, he had convinced himself that she was waiting for him to find and save her. One day, they were going to live happily again, like a family, together. This misguided goal kept him alive more than anything else. Of course, it didn't end well. Nothing ever did in this damn world. Sitting just a few centimeters away from a puddle of human blood, Sunny chuckled and rubbed his face. Was there even such a thing as a happy ending? What is taking that bastard so long? Granted, he knew exactly where Castor was, and what he was doing. Currently, he was raising his hand to open the door of Harper's hut. Sunny tiredly picked himself up from the floor and shook off the weight of reminiscence. What was the point of remembering the past? He had to survive the future. Chapter 164 Farewell. Castor brought him water, strips of cloth, and a crude tunic. While Sunny was washing the blood off his body, the proud legacy carefully moved Harper's corpse into a corner, buried it under the pile of seaweed thatch, and wiped the blood off the floor as much as he could. This way, an accidental glance inside the hut would not reveal too much. Of course, even a little bit of scrutiny, and the signs of what had happened here would become apparent. While doing all this, Castor was speaking. The easiest way to get rid of a corpse is to simply toss it off the platform. With luck, it won't land on the road. But even if it does, no one would pay it a lot of attention. People die all the time out here in the Dark City, especially those living in the outer settlement. He paused, then continued. However, we can't do that, because Harper isn't just a random slum rat, but someone who is working for the Bright Lord. The guards will become interested in his sudden death, and they'll use it to create trouble for you and Lady Nephice. So we need to make him disappear completely. That won't be easy. Sunny glanced at him and frowned. What's the big deal? I can just carry him down the hill and dump the body somewhere in the ruins. It's night outside. No one will see anything. Castor shook his head. Castle Guard has various types of observers watching the road day and night. You will be noticed. Unless someone persuades them to look the other way, of course. He sighed. It won't be cheap, but I can make it happen. Tomorrow after sunset you will have about an hour to carry the body to the ruins and return. Sorry, but I can't buy you more time. This will wipe what little shards I have left already. His voice sounded as though the handsome young man was genuinely concerned for his comrade, but in reality, he was just reiterating how much Sunny owed him now. And if that message was not enough, he could always threaten to reveal the secret of how Harper died in the future. Castor had him in the palm of his hand. Sunny smiled darkly. And what do I do until then? The legacy shrugged. Just act natural and try not to speak to anyone. You're kind of a loner as it is. No one will suspect anything. After that, he thought for a few moments and added, Oh. No one should enter this hut for a long while. Harper lived in the castle for these past few months, so people in the slum won't notice his absence yet. Neither will guards, since he made a report recently. We should be fine. Sunny stared at him with a strange expression. Do you want to read more chapters? What? He shook his head. No, nothing. I'm just wondering how many bodies did you make disappear already? Castor frowned. This is my first, actually. In the Dark City, it is usually more advantageous to leave the body somewhere where everyone can see. Made sense. Why kill someone if not to make others think twice before attacking you in the future? Sonny was a real amateur when it came to murder. He really could not compete with the legacies. Just like that, they left the pitiful hut behind and returned to the lodge. With no one paying him any attention, Sonny returned to his room and sat quietly on his narrow cot. He thought that he wouldn't be able to sleep this night, tormented by both the knowledge of what Nephias was planning and the memories of Harper dying by his hand. But in the end, his exhausted consciousness slipped into oblivion as soon as his head touched the pillow. In the morning, he woke up with a start, expecting a crowd of furious slum dwellers to be rushing inside, all eager to. Well, what could they really do? If push came to shove, very few of them could actually harm him. But no one was there. After hesitating for a while, he decided to act as he would on any other day. Leaving his room, Sonny walked outside to wash his face. Neff's little helpers either greeted or ignored him, just like usual. Their smiles were friendly and fleeting. No one looked at him twice. Strangely disturbed, Sonny escaped the lodge and looked up at the sky. Nothing had changed. Everything was the same as it had been yesterday, and every day before that. How could this be? He had violently murdered someone, but no one seemed to care. The world had moved on without Harper, indifferent to the pain and horror that were now frozen forever in the dead eyes of the timid, pitiful young man. Even the guards did not seem to notice the disappearance of their spy. Sonny rubbed his face, hiding a pained grimace. His head hurt with a terrible migraine. If they don't care, why should I? Forget about that fool. But he did care. Irrational as it was, he felt compelled to mourn the death of his victim, even if he was the only one who would. Maybe because this situation was eerily identical to how he had always imagined his own death to happen, utterly unnoticed. Discarded and forgotten, with not a single soul to care that he had ever existed. Pathetic. Returning inside, Sonny entered his room and sat on the cot, staring at the wall. He spent most of the day there, going out only once to pretend to train with the Midnight Shard. While he was repeating the katas, he thought that he caught sight of Nephias observing the movements of his sword with a frown on her face. But a second later, she was distracted and drawn away by the never-ending torrent of tasks required of her. Good riddance. Go chat with Castor, see if I care. Come to Pandanovel, com. His sudden anger surprised Sonny. Well, at least it was better than the grim apathy that reigned over him this whole day. What's wrong with my mind lately? It's like I'm back on the Ashen Barrow. Frowning, he dismissed the Midnight Shard and returned to his room. However, someone was waiting for him there. It was Cassie. The blind girl stood silently with her back to the door, holding the wooden staff in her hands. Her face was unusually still. It almost looked bleak. Sonny's heart skipped a bit. Did she find out? Forcing out a fake grin, he made his voice sound cheerful and said, "Oh, hey Cass. Do you want something?" She turned to him and, after a moment of hesitation, smiled. However, something about her smile was off. It was almost as though it was as forced as his own. The blind girl lingered, then said, "No, nothing in particular." Sonny blinked a couple of times. What's up with her today? Meanwhile, Cassie raised her hand and found his shoulder. No, actually, I have a present for you. He raised his eyebrow. A present? She nodded. In the next moment, a spark of energy suddenly traveled from her body into his. Sonny flinched. You have received a memory, Endless Spring. Wasn't it, that pretty glass bottle of hers, one that contained an almost endless amount of water? Why was she giving it to him? Why are you gifting me this all of a sudden? She was silent for a few moments, then gently shook her head. I just wanted to. Why? Can't I give you something, After everything that you have done for us? Sunny hesitated. I guess you can. I just didn't expect it. Cassie gripped his shoulder and remained motionless for a weirdly long amount of time. Then she looked away and said, her voice light and even, We'll meet again soon, Sunny. Weirdo. He patted her hand and said, a little embarrassed, Of course we will. Where would I go? This lodge is too small for us not to bump into each other all the time anyway. She slowly removed her hand and chuckled. Yeah. You're right, of course. I'll go now. With that, she turned away and headed for the door. Sunny stared at her back and shrugged. All right. Bye. What has gotten into her? Reaching the doorway, Cassie froze for a second. Without turning her head and letting him see her face, she lingered for a while, then quietly said, Goodbye, Sunny. Chapter 165 Power. For the rest of the day, Sunny had nothing to do but count the hours until sunset. When the night descended, he would have to return to the scene of the crime he had committed, retrieve the body of his victim, and carry it into the ruins under the cover of darkness. How did it come to this? Alone in his tiny room, he stared at the wall and waited. Soon, the fear of going into the dark city at night overpowered the bleak and hollow feeling that reigned over his soul. People rarely risked leaving the hill after the dark. In the starless void of the forgotten shore, any source of light was bound to attract the attention of creatures that no human would even want to meet. Countless horrors stalked the streets of the city at night. Only a madman would risk entering the ruins after the sun was gone. Of course, there were plenty of madmen in the dark city. Sunny, at least, didn't need any light. He also knew the area surrounding the bright castle well enough to avoid most danger. The weeks he had spent learning from Effie didn't go to waste. I should be fine. With the shadows hiding his every movement, Sunny was sure of his ability to at least run away should something happen. Still, with each passing minute, his heart felt colder and colder. When the shadow of the Crimson Spire drowned the world and colored his thoughts with the eerie feeling of dread, he gritted his teeth. It's almost time. However, before the sun completely disappeared, another unexpected guest appeared at the doorstep of his room. Looking at Sunny with a scowl, Nephi gestured for him to stand up and said in an even tone, Come with me. Sunny's heart skipped a bit. What does she want? Suppressing the sickly fear of being caught, he lingered for a few moments, then slowly stood up and followed Changing Star out of the lodge. Together, the two of them walked to a secluded part of the slum. Neff remained silent, not even looking in his direction. She seemed calm, like always. Sunny, however, struggled to keep himself from panicking. Various thoughts, one darker than the other, found their way into his head. Did that bastard Castor tell her everything? Do you want to read more chapters? Finally, they reached the remote alley where no one would have been able to overhear their conversation. It was filled with nothing but the crimson light of sunset and deep shadows. Turning around, Changing Star looked at him with a frown. Sunny met her gaze, his face grim. He felt as though he was staring at his judge and executioner. I've seen you practicing with the sword today. Your moves were weak and aimless. It was as if you had lost all clarity. What were you thinking about? Sunny slowly exhaled. So, that's what this was about. She didn't know anything. She just picked up on the turmoil raging in his mind. He should have felt relieved, but for some reason, Sunny felt anger rising in his chest instead. With a crooked smile, he looked away and answered, Murder. I was thinking about murder. Nephi tilted her head, waiting for an explanation. Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then said, his voice strangely cold. You once told me that the essence of combat is murder, didn't you? She gave him a nod. He stared at her, then said, Well, how come you know so much about murder, Neff? Huh! I wanted to ask you that since the day you cut off Andel's head without so much as batting an eye. You are out here preaching about how we are all fellow humans, not some beasts. Was Andal not human? Come to PANDNOVEL, she scowled. Is this what it's all about? Sonny gritted his teeth. It's a part of it. Nephi's was silent for a long time. At some point, she absent-mindedly raised one arm and rubbed her neck. Finally, she said, It's not that I have murdered a lot of people. It's that a lot of people have tried to murder me. Sonny blinked. Why would anyone want to kill you? She smiled. Why? All kinds of reasons, really. My family was really powerful once, don't you remember? But power, it's a dangerous thing, Sonny. You can't reach its peak without creating a lot of enemies. And when your power disappears one day, all those enemies remain. Turning her face away, she said with her usual indifferent voice. I think I was 5, 6 years old when someone tried to kill me for the first time? It was my nanny. She led me to an empty room, put her hands around my neck, and tried to strangle me. I thought that it was a game. For the first few seconds at least. Neff looked at him with white sparks dancing in her eyes. That was how I learned what weakness is. And when my teacher, who happened to walk by, rushed inside and used his aspect ability to kill her, that was how I learned what strength is. So yes. I'm not a stranger to severed heads, Sonny. Is that what you wanted to know? He stared at her, then slowly shook his head. How frightened she must have felt, how powerless. Powerlessness, he knew how it felt all too well. Somehow, Sonny had never imagined that proud and indomitable changing star had tasted it, too. Was shaped by it. Just like he was. Meanwhile, Nephi smiled. But there was no humor in her eyes. So then, what did you want to know? Huh, Sonny? What is this all about? Do you think I haven't noticed the way you were staring at me ever since we fought the Spire messenger? Come clean with it. You owe me at least this much. He glared at her for a long time, a storm of emotions written on his pale, grim face. Finally making a decision, Sonny gritted his teeth and said, I want to know what your real goal is. I want to know if it's all worth it.